When you're getting ready to analyze your data, you may have the situation where your data lives in more than one file. Now, SPSS lets you have more than one file open, but a number of procedures, the data needs to be in the exact same file. Fortunately, SPSS has a command that lets you combine data, either by adding new cases that have the same variables, or by adding more variables for the existing cases. And in this movie, I'm going to show you how to do both of these. I'm beginning with a data set that's called search1.save. This is simply the top left quadrant of the data file that we used in the last two movies. I have information on a number of states about Google search patterns. What I'm going to do though is if you scroll down, you can see that I only have data through Montana. I have 27 cases here. I want to add the remaining states using the same variables. And what I have is another data file that has all the same variables in the same order, but has the remaining states. To do that, I come up to Data, and I come down about halfway to Merge Files. And this is where it asks me if I want to add cases, that's more observations with the same variables, or whether I want to add variables for the same cases. I'm going to do both, but on this one, I'm going to add cases. Now, you can do this with either a data file that's currently open. That's the top one, an open data set, but that's grayed out because I don't have another data set open right now. Or you can use an external SPSS data file. I have that other data file. It's saved in a folder, and I'm just going to open it up by clicking Browse. This one is just called Search2. So I'm going to double click on that. And then the full path shows up right here, and I'm just going to click Continue. And so what it does now is it brings up a dialog box that attempts to pair the variables by whether they come from the active data set or from the one that I'm opening. But since I have the exact same variables in both of them, everything is paired up in the two of them. I can scroll down the list, and you see that all the same variables occur. If I wanted to, I can select Indicate Case Source as a variable that's at the bottom of the list. And what this would do is it would add a new variable to the data set, and it would indicate whether the cases came from the first data set or the cases came from the second data set. And it's a way of keeping things straight. I don't need it in this case because there's no overlap and there will be no confusion between the two of them. I'm just going to press OK. And I get the syntax in the results to say it is adding cases. I go back to the data set. Previously, I only went through Montana, and now you can see that I've added Nebraska all the way down to Wyoming. Now I have the same variables in the same order, and now I just have more cases. On the other hand, maybe I have the cases I want, but I want to add more variables, more information about them. What I have right now is just Google search history. I can scroll through, and all of these end with _GS to indicate these are Google search patterns. But I have other information about each state that would be useful in analyzing these patterns. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add new variables to the data set. I go back to where I was before. I go up to Data, come down again to Merge Files, except this time I select the second option, Add Variables. And again, I have the option of using an open data set, but the one I have isn't open, or an external data set. Mine are saved in an external data set. So I'm going to click on Browse, and I'm going to use Search3. I'll just double click on that. There it is, and I click Continue. And now it's bringing up the data set. There is one variable that is excluded, and it's state. Now that's the key variable that I use in both of them as a way of lining things up. You can see, for instance, that it has state, and then it has a plus in parentheses. That tells me that it's from the new data set that I'm adding. And so it would be redundant. We don't need it again. All I'm going to do now is click OK. And it tells me that it's adding a bunch of new variables. I go back to the data set. And previously, we stopped with the Google searches, the _GS. But now you can see I've added several new variables. I'm going to scroll through them from has_NFL, whether a state has an NFL team, through division. And so what I've done is in the first example, I added new cases to the data set. I added new states. And in the second example, I added new variables. And what this does is it takes 3 separate data files and combines them into one, which lets me do more analyses, compare the relationships between the variables than I would be able to do otherwise. Now, the data may have been spread out across several sources and typically many different locally stored spreadsheets in an organization. And by merging the cases or the variables, you're able to get in a much more productive situation of having all of your data in one place. When you have that, then it's much easier to break things down, to compare the groups, and to examine trends and outcomes. All of these can give you a much more powerful insight into your data.